So essentially today we're going to take you through some key parts of what the State Revenue Officer's part in these reforms are. So we'll talk a little bit about who we are. We'll do a little bit about explaining the levy itself and who needs to pay that. We'll take you through what the registration process looks like for the levy, and that is different to the registration that we've heard about previously. We'll talk about then paying the levy, and we'll also have a look at how that lodgement process works. And then we'll talk about some helpful resources that will be available. This is basically a webinar that will be available on our website shortly. We're hoping tomorrow. Catherine's busily working through it this afternoon, so we're hoping that'll be there that you can watch the video, so this exact presentation. If we can just leave our questions to the end, that'd be good, because we might actually answer some of those on the way through. So the State Revenue Office is Victoria's major revenue collection agency. We're responsible for the collection of revenue and administration of state legislation. So we administer many pieces of legislation on behalf of the government, including some of those ones listed up there, the Land Tax Act, Payroll Tax Act, and more recently, the Commercial Passenger Vehicle Industry Act. So you may have a little bit of interaction with us at some point along the way in one of those spaces. Let's have a look at the levy a little bit. So from 1 July 2018, a $1 levy has been introduced in Victoria on every taxi and hire car service, including rideshare that originates in Victoria. The State Revenue Office has been tasked with collecting, administering and enforcing that levy. And will be the point of contact for industry bodies and levy payers when it comes to declaration and payment of that levy. So some key dates to think about. Registration opens on the 1st of July, so that's Sunday. You're due to register, if you need to, by the 30th of September. But remember, the levy actually commences on the 1st of July. So you've got in that period to register if you are working and active. I think, as we know, the commercial passenger vehicle service levy forms just one small part of Victoria Government's package of industry reforms to establish a single commercial passenger vehicle industry. So the levy is designed to help recover the cost of transitional assistance provided to certain industry participants and partly fund the regulation of the industry. So the levy is self-reporting, and the SRO will support businesses with education resources, easy and efficient registration, lodgement and payment processes. And I'll highlight that you had a pamphlet, I think it ended up on people's seats, that does have a direct link to our website that takes you straight to all the trip levy information. So that instead of going to sort of search around and find it, you can go direct to that link. So in terms of what services attract the levy applies to all commercial passenger vehicle service transactions that originate in Victoria. For the service to attract the levy, it has to include the carriage of one or more passengers. I'm going to hand over to Catherine now, and she's going to continue from there.
Thank you very much, Brett. Hello, everybody. What we're going to do now is talk about who pays the levy, and certainly this is where we get a lot of questions coming through on the email and through our call centres as well about who is actually liable to pay. So we've got some scenarios broken down for you. Essentially, what it comes down to is whether or not the trip is booked or unbooked. That's the question we'll ask in every instance. What is the nature of the trip? If it's a booked trip, then it's the business that's taking the booking service provider that has to pay the levy. Now, you can be a booking service provider but not be registered as a booking service provider. So that's a possibility. That doesn't exclude you from the levy. Right, so that's just a little confusion that we wanted to clear up. Just because you haven't registered doesn't mean that you don't have to pay the levy, okay? Now, with unbooked trips, if a trip starts at a rank or when a vehicle is hailed by a passenger, the driver pays unless they are employed by the vehicle's owner. It is then the vehicle's owner that pays the levy in those instances. So we'll always go back to that scenario. Is it booked or is it unbooked? So what we've got now is the scenarios. We've got our first scenario, and this is a very common one. We get asked this question a lot. And what I also want to say as well before we get into these scenarios is that you could have some really complicated setups with your business. You might have all these extra parties involved, and this person pays this percentage, and this person does it by paying this way or through an app, all of these different things. We'll always come back to, booked or unbooked, employee or not, and is there a booking service provider involved? All right. So even though sometimes a scenario can look very complex from the outset, it does actually come back to something quite simple. And we encourage the questions to come through. Obviously today, we won't be best placed to address everybody's complex scenario, but what we are very happy to do is take all of those questions on notice and help you directly. Brett and myself from our customer education unit, so we deal directly with the customers. We're not in a compliance division or anything like that, so we'd encourage you to provide us with those scenarios. Yes?
Let me just clarify one small thing. You can have it booked, that's a cash payment. How does the booking agency get the money? Against, I pick up off the street, it's an electronic transaction, how do I get the dollar to?
Yeah, so from the perspective of the levy and who is leviable and who is required under the legislation to pay it, it's about who took the booking. It's not necessarily about how you recoup that cost, because the levy itself, you can choose to pass it on, but you're not required to pass it on. So some businesses will choose to absorb it, others will choose to pass it on. And so the arrangements that you have in place about collecting it from the driver, or if you passed it on to the passenger, that's an internal situation that you will have to work out as part of the introduction of this change. But in terms of your registration for the levy, it would be the booking service provider that is registered and is required to pay the dollar. Now with the extra GST component, and I'm going to talk about GST later, but the GST, you don't need to pass that on to the SRO because it's a federal tax, it's GST. We're only required to collect the dollar. But I've got more information coming up about that shortly. Okay, so with the bailment agreement, which would be quite common, you've got in this scenario a SIM has a driver agreement, a bailment agreement with the owner of the taxi. He drives the taxi, then returns it to the owner of the vehicle. But he's not an employee, very clearly not an employee. If a SIM picks up a customer at a ramp or when hailed by a passenger, then he pays the levy. So it's a SIM's responsibility to register for and pay the levy. However, if he picks up a customer who, for example, and I say example only, you're using an app or phone, it could be in any way. If that was a booked trip, the booking service provider is required to pay the levy on that particular trip. Second scenario we've got is an owner-driver. So Sam provides trips using her own car. Again, booked or unbooked. If she's picking up customers at a rank or when hailed by a passenger, she pays the levy. If they're booked trips through a booking service provider that we've provided to her, it's the booking service provider that's required to pay the levy on those trips. Third scenario, this is the one where it gets a little bit different. So this is for a scenario where the driver is actually an employee of the owner of the vehicle. So again, using our ABC example, which is a common example in the slides, Rahul is employed by ABC Proprietary Limited, which owns the vehicle that he drives. If he picks up a customer who hailed him on the street, it's ABC Proprietary Limited that is required to pay the levy. Because the owner of the vehicle employs Rahul, so he is their employee. If Rahul picks up a customer through a booked service, so it's through a booking service provider, it's the booking service provider that pays. So in this instance, Rahul doesn't have to register at all because he's employed by someone that owns the vehicle, so they pay the levy, and then with the booking service provider, the booking service provider pays the levy. Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong. In most cases, the booking service provider and the proprietor who employs Rahul could be one and the same.
They could be, yes. Yeah.
So unless they're taking a job from an independent booking service provider,
They
they'll
could,
be
that's
one and the
right.
same.
The booking service provider could be the owner of the vehicle, that's exactly right. Yeah. Fourth scenario, we have Marcus taking booked work only through a booking service provider, so it's the booking service provider that pays. But if at any time Marcus was to take unbooked work, that's when the requirement to register for the levy for himself as an individual for his business, that's when that would kick in. Now, as I mentioned before, you can choose to pass on the cost of the levy if it's not a requirement. If you do, however, pass it on, there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. You need to comply. Oh, sorry. Yeah, my apologies. I've been reading this content and dealing with commercial passenger vehicle service levy content for the last couple of weeks non-stop, so I'm sorry. All right, so if you do choose to pass the cost of the levy on to the customer, you need to obviously comply with all of the industry regulations, including those regulations that relate to fares. And there is GST applicable to it. So if you pass it on, you must apply the GST. But as I mentioned, that doesn't come to the SRO. It's just the $1 levy that's being charged by the Victorian government. The GST component is declared as part of the vehicle side of things.
Will there be a sunset one?
There isn't currently a sunset clause within the legislation that I'm aware of. Yeah, that's how the legislation has been passed. Yes.
So the dollar is GST exclusive?
No, so it is inclusive if you pass it on. So if you pass it on, there's GST. If you don't pass it on, there's no GST. Because it's GST on the service.
Can we just leave the question? Sorry. Can we just get, we'll come back from your first question, talking to you. But can we just finish doing the presentation, then come back to the question?
Yeah. So I am on the GST slide, so we'll talk about GST. GST component only applies if you pass the levy on to the customer.
Sorry. So if I pass the dollar on, will the charge be $1.10?
Yes, it would be $1.10.
How's that
As a total, on the total fare, the 10% is added to the dollar, so it's $1.10 per liter, yes.
How's that policed whether I've collected the money off the passenger or not?
Well, it's not policed whether you pass it on or not because it's not a requirement to pass it on. You can